When I'm not watching animal attack videos on YouTube, I like to answer questions from comments. So let's get right to it. How do you feel about guitars with scalloped frets and with fanned frets? So first of all, if you don't know what scalloped frets means, it's basically where on the fretboard between the frets, it's been kind of carved out. So it's like a concave shape between the frets. Now, the only scalloped fret guitar I've personally played is the Yngwie Malmsteen Strat, which was kind of a ridiculous experience. This is like a really heavily scalloped fretboard, so you don't really touch the fretboard at all. You just pin the string to the frets, and you can like be a lot faster that way because there's no resistance. Until you play a scalloped fret guitar, you don't realize how much resistance the fretboard is actually causing with like bending and stuff like that. Now, it was just kind of an awkward experience for the first time playing because at first I was like, what in the world? It just feels so differently, especially when you're trying to kind of do chords and stuff like that. You don't realize how much you depend on actually pinching against the wood of the fretboard to help you out. But after playing it for like 15 minutes, I was just like flying. Like I just like turned into a shredder by virtue of playing the Malmsteen Strat. And it kind of scared me a little bit. I went to a really dark place. But I don't know if I'd ever own a guitar with scalloped frets, but definitely if you like doing single line like lead stuff and you really enjoy like speed, go for scalloped frets all the way. As far as fanned frets, if you don't know what that is, most guitars you'll see the frets are perpendicular to the neck, right? Now fanned frets, you might have seen on some guitars, they kind of come at a different angle. And there are a couple different reasons for this. They say it's better for intonation. The bridge is going to be offset, so the scale length of each string could be different a lot of times, and ergonomically it feels better too. Now, I've only played a couple custom-made guitars with fanned frets, and it wasn't as awkward as I anticipated it being. You'd think by virtue of the frets being slanted, you might have to reposition the way you even kind of like approach a guitar, but honestly, it wasn't nearly as awkward as I thought it was going to be, and in a lot of ways, especially when it came to kind of barring one thing and doing other things, it did feel better. Now, the drawback to fanned fret guitars is usually they're more expensive, but I would definitely recommend to anybody who gets a chance to try a fanned fret guitar to check it out because, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense, so go for it. If you could have the musical abilities of any musician, who would it be and why? I think the right answer to this question is I would choose the musical abilities of myself because I'm an individual. But that's a stupid answer and not in the spirit of the question. So I'm going to go with Matt Bellamy, the front man from the band Muse. The guy is an awesome guitar player. He can do pretty much anything on an electric guitar. He can shred, he can play in all different types of styles. He's an incredible piano player, an otherworldly rock singer, and he can also compose like orchestral symphonies as he's done in like different albums. Like the last part of Resistance was like a bunch of like suites. That's just like all orchestral music. Even though a lot of it was ripped off from Rachmaninoff's Second, I'm on to you, Bellamy. I still think he is just a really genius musician, and I don't really use that word lightly. I think he's just awesome. He's great at everything he's done. I'm a huge Muse fan, and especially just the way those guys gel as a group. It's pretty awesome. Matt Bellamy, final answer. Not really about guitar, but how long have you been playing bass, and what things do you like about bass over guitar, and vice versa? What is the biggest differences between guitar and bass? Thanks, I saw the Rickenbacker headstock in the back and couldn't help but asking. Yeah, thanks for noticing. This is my Rickenbacker 4003. I've had this for about 2 years now. I used to be a Fender Jazz bass player, but I've been playing guitar for like 15 years now, almost, maybe like 14 years, and I've only been playing bass for like 11 years because I mean pretty early on I always just kind of wanted a bass. It just seemed kind of cool. It seemed easier because there's usually only 4 strings as compared to 6 on a guitar, and the thickness of the strings is definitely the first thing that you notice. That and just kind of, you know, the scale length can change depending on what kind of bass you get and stuff, but I think my favorite thing about bass is just kind of the way it makes you think. Chords generally don't sound great on a bass. In fact, though, the Rickenbacker, one of the main positives for it is that you can actually play chords and it doesn't just sound like a bunch of mush like a lot of bass guitars do. But I just think philosophically, when you're playing bass, most of the time you're playing one note, and it can really help tighten up your theory and how you think about a song, because when you're restricted to playing one note at a time, you really think in a different way than you would if you're just kind of like going down between shapes. You kind of hone in on certain parts of a shape. So maybe like if you just play like the major scale on a bass, you really get a better relationship between the 1 and the 5, or the 1 and the 4, or a 1 and a major third, or 1 and a minor third, stuff like that. I think the intervals really kind of fall into place a little bit better if you're thinking from a bass standpoint. Another thing I really like about bass is probably my favorite instrument to play live in like a live setting. For whatever reason, I just feel like I can relax a little bit more and enjoy a performance on bass, whereas like if I'm playing guitar, I feel like I have to be focused for almost the entire time because there's always like a lot going on whenever I find myself playing guitar. In drums, you kind of have to like load an entire kit in and out, which is like such a ridiculous experience. Guitars, you usually have to have like a pedal board and like an amp. You have to set things up. But bass is great. You just have an amp, you have a bass, and you have a cable. You can use pedals and stuff too, but for the most part, that's all you really need. And it's just kind of like a low maintenance instrument. You don't have to change your strings that often, if ever, if you're an average bass player. But the one thing I do want to kind of talk about is playing bass like a guitar player as compared to playing bass like a bass player. Like when you first start, if you go from guitar to bass, you usually think in the exact same terms and maybe even like use a pick. But a lot of the advantages tone-wise from bass come from using your fingers, and that's actually a lot different. You can do like a lot of different rhythmic things like slapping and popping on a bass guitar. And playing bass like a bass player is something that you kind of actually have to think about. There's so many bass players, not that it's even a bad thing, but they play bass like a guitar player. And I think that's why bass kind of does get a bad name, because anybody can just pick up a bass and play it like a guitar and be like, well, this is easy. You know, there's only 4 strings, it's so easy. But to actually play bass like a guitar player and use it the way it's kind of meant to be is more of a nuanced and intricate thing. Not to totally defend all bass players, because they're kind of worthy of a lot of the backlash they get, but there is a difference between playing bass like a bass player and playing bass like a guitar player. So that brings us to listening homework for this week, a band that is known to use a Rickenbacker for 003 Live, Unknown Mortal Orchestra. Now, they've only got a couple albums, and I think their latest one, Multi-Love, is by far their best album. It's kind of psychedelic, but the recording techniques and styles they use are really cool. The thing I want you to listen for in the song I'm going to link you to is how it opens with a keyboard kind of solo intro part, and then later on he uses a very effect-heavy guitar line to mimic that keyboard part. And I think it's like really a great lesson in how you can use a guitar to sound kind of like a different instrument, but you're doing it in like a songwriting way that kind of keeps the whole progression kind of fresh. So check out Unknown Mortal Orchestra. They got a lot of great songs, and definitely any questions or comments you have, please leave them in the comment section, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.